Welcome to this episode of 30-Minute Money. I'm Steve Wershing. Real estate in Rochester, real estate nationally has been white hot, and that can result in higher taxes for a lot of people who own homes. Right about now, this time of year, the new assessments are going out, and many people are alarmed that their tax bills will be rising pretty significantly. And some people wonder what they can do about it. And what you can do about it, if you have a question, if you don't think it's correct, you can contest that assessment and ask the town to reevaluate your home and potentially lower your tax bill. But the process has some twists and turns, and there are some things you need to know to do that effectively. So with us today is Nathan Gabbert. Nate is a real estate appraiser for about 38 years. He is an SRA with the Appraisal Institute. He's also a fellow of the Institute of Assessment Officers. He's been, as I said, an appraiser since 1984. And what makes him uniquely qualified for this conversation is that for 22 years, he was the assessor of the town of Henrietta. And so every year he's gone through this and worked with taxpayers to figure out whether or not they're being taxed appropriately. So to help you understand what you can do to lower your tax bill, if that is in fact what should be done, we're going to walk through how you go about contesting your appraisal and some of the information around it. So Nate Gabbert, welcome to 30-Minute Money.
Well, good day. It's good to be here.
So as I said, the real estate market in Rochester is nuts. It's, people are bidding
strong.
All kinds of prices that we've never seen before. How might that affect people's taxes?
Well, the job of the assessment function is basically to come up with a value for every piece of property in the jurisdiction, reflecting a uniform percentage of its value. And if your property value goes up for some reason, your assessed value will probably go up for some reason, which might mean that your share of that is going to be greater. Conversely, if something happens to your home to make it worth less, then your share theoretically would be less than before. So your taxes could alter, it could change in that situation.
So they could go up or they could go down.
They could.
Yeah, but
and again, it depends. When you talk about the real estate market being strong, there's no question the residential market is very strong. Commercial sectors in some cases are steady, and some types of commercial property are not very strong at all. And so depending on how your town is put together, if it's primarily residential, that's going to be a wave of valuation changes, as opposed to a town where you have a strong commercial industrial base, which may not rise at the same level. Okay. So we can't just uniformly say everything's up 10% or everything's down 15%. Okay. It's sectored quite a bit.
Great. Well, let's just talk about residential properties, because that's
sure.
Most of our listeners are going to be worried about the taxes they pay on their own home. Mm-hmm. So thanks for explaining what an assessment actually is. How does that differ from an appraisal?
The assessed value of the property is the assessor's estimate of value as of a specific day and time. The valuation date for each assessment roll typically is July 1st of the prior year, based on a taxable status date of March 1st of the current year. Now, these are pretty statutorily similar throughout the state, unless you're in a city. If you're in a city, or some remaining villages have a different calendar. For the most part, an appraisal is going to be for whatever day you want. If you appraise the property as of today, or 10 years ago in case of an estate or something, an appraisal is going to be more immediate, more direct. An assessed value is going to be, it could be based on individual comparisons. It could be done by a mass appraisal tool. There are a lot of multiple regression models and systems that can be used for mass appraisal. The assessed value is good for your tax load only.
Okay.
Appraisal could be used for any purpose.
Yeah. So that brings up a couple interesting points. One is that so the appraisal is something done specifically on your house, and you would do it for a specific day. So typically, if I called an appraiser, come out and appraise my house, if I don't tell him anything else, he's gonna give me an estimate of what it's worth today. but
More than
the
likely, yes.
assessment that my tax bill is going to be based on what it was worth last July, is what you're
Mhm.
saying.
Yes.
Okay, so
And the status of the property on March 1st of this year,
okay, so
which is a technical difference that
yeah, let's
sometimes.
not dig too far into that. I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if your house is
Yeah.
under construction, yeah, let's not worry
Right.
about that. Like, yeah, so if I added an addition onto my home, you know, this month, then it's
On
not going
March
to show up in
2nd.
the assessment, right? But
That is
let's
correct.
not get too not get too deep into that. But
Sure.
if what that means is that if my neighborhood has gone up dramatically since the beginning of the year, that's not going to be reflected in my assessment, because my assessment is based on the value last July.
That is theoretically correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if I wanted to get an appraisal, we'll get into this in a little bit, but if I wanted to get an appraisal for the purpose of contesting my assessment, I'd need to ask the appraiser to appraise it as of last July.
Then you have a situation with an appraiser who is going to have to say exactly why the report is being written and who it's written for and the purpose of it. And if it's for a mortgage loan, that's one thing. If it's written for an assessment challenge, that's something else. And that's got to be pretty clear up front when you have an appraisal done for that purpose.
So one of the other things that you brought up was that sometimes assessments can change based on a mass tool. So there's some kind of software, there's some kind of a system that could just take an entire neighborhood and change the value. They're not necessarily looking at one property in particular, and that could be one reason why your assessment could theoretically at least be off a little bit. Is that right?
Well, whether it's an appraisal or an assessed value, it's going to be an opinion based on the facts. If you use a computer-assisted mass appraisal tool, or CAMA modeling as it's called, it's going to be based on a population of sales that the algorithm believes to be similar to yours. All the algorithms in the world cannot adjust for a pink house or a location next to a gas station. That's the kind of thing you have to do manually. When you run these models, that's a good start, but then you really should be able to go through and justify every single number that it produces.
Right. And when you say you're talking about the assessor's office, right? You're not talking about the taxpayer. Right. Okay. So anyway, so so this is not necessarily done house by house. There could be some variations, within a neighborhood. They might reassess an entire neighborhood and not necessarily get everybody exactly right because, they're using a tool to do hundreds of houses at once.
Yep. A lot of it's based on inventory. It's of interest right now is something called the bonus room. A lot of new homes are being built with this unfinished area over the garage, accessible through a roughed in door that you don't see. When the house is built, you pay a price for it. And then at some point in the future, a lot of people will finish off the bonus room. Generally, there are no building permits for that. And it just kind of appears with extra square footage and size. And then when it sells later on for a lot more, the inventory that the town has as to square footage and number of rooms and things could be wrong. These things do happen.
Okay. So just generally, the objective of assessment is to try to get everybody's property right, but it doesn't always happen, and so there's an opportunity possibly for somebody to engage with the assessor to see if they can change. So if somebody's assessment changes, how do they find that out?
Well, as with most things, timing is the key. In New York State, again, the towns in the state, pretty much statewide, have to produce what's called a tentative assessment roll. Usually that has to be finished on May 1st of each year. And that would be a digital document which states the assessed value of every parcel in town, whether it's your home, your business, your restaurant, your church, your school, whatever. This has to be done by May 1st. This year, May 1st was on a Sunday. And so there's a little leeway there for that. The towns have to put that on their website and make it publicly available for anybody to see in the month of May. Again, because of technical matters, it doesn't always get up there on May 1st, but it does have to be available. It is usually by roll section and by tax account number. So if you want to find your home on that tentative roll, it may be difficult. You may have to scroll through hundreds of thousands of pages. The alternative is, if you can't find it right away, you could call the assessor's office and ask, what is the 2022 tentative assessment of my home? and they will tell you. After the tentative roll is put together, the town has that information available as a tentative assessment roll for the year.
Okay.
They are required to send a notice to the property owner within 10 days of grievance day, or, you know, that's the window. You have to have notice to any, if your assessment is increasing, you should receive a notice from the assessing jurisdiction saying so. It could be as close as 10 days from grievance day. If you don't get the notice, there's another part of the law that says it doesn't matter, because if the notice is lost in the mail or the dog ate it or whatever, it doesn't invalidate the tentative assessment.
Okay. So
to find out for sure.
Yeah, so if you get a letter from your town or your city, then you should probably open it pretty quick, because you may only have a few days to look at it. And regardless, if it's in the middle of May, it wouldn't be a bad idea to, you know, go to your town's website and see if you can find your property. How would somebody find their tax ID number if they don't know it?
The tax ID number is printed on your school tax bill or your town and county bill. It'll be a long number with digits and hyphens, and it's not common for people to pay their own taxes. Quite often a residential home will have a mortgage and the taxes are paid through an escrow, and you get a receipt which may or may not have the tax number on there. It should be available in some kind of documents you have. If not, again, you can call the town and ask. Any town clerk would be able to tell you what the tax account number is, or your tax receiver or whoever. Okay.
So you can call the town hall and you should be able to find that out. And so let's walk through, if you think the assessment is wrong, for one reason or another, because it went up a lot or because you don't think they've got the facts right, what's the process? What can you do about that?
Well, after the May 1st tentative roll, you have a period of time until what's called grievance day, which by law is the fourth Tuesday in May. This year, that's going to be May 24th, which again does not really apply to cities or some villages. It's May 24th for most of the state. The suburban towns would be May 24th. You might, if you believe your assessment is unfair or too high or misclassified or whatever, you have to challenge that by filling out a form called an RP 524, and it has to be delivered to the assessing jurisdiction by grievance day. It's a 4-page form. You can get it online. Your town will probably have some provided on their website or paper copies if you stop in. The instructions are almost as long as the form. Most of the form is generic, that does not apply to your situation. It's not that difficult to do. And then that is presented to the Board of Assessment Review, which meets starting on grievance day for a few days, probably after that. And you have the option to be heard if you want to appear. Most towns, many towns require you to appear because the information provided usually is relative. You have to do two things. You have to prove, first of all, that you believe your assessment is unfair, but then you have to tell the board what you think it ought to be. And you can't just say it's wrong, something must be done. You actually have to have a number that you claim on your grievance form what you want. Yeah.
So this is I think probably the most important part. If you think that your assessment is wrong and you want to say, no, it's not worth that, it's worth this number here, what are the kinds of things that you can provide to the Board of Assessment Review that would be legal, or that they can consider?
The best thing to do is to have a list of comparable sales. Many towns, the larger municipalities, quite often will put that out there for you, and you can scroll through and see similar Cape Cod style homes and what they sold for, how many bedrooms and bathrooms a year built, and then compare them that way. And based on that, you can come up with some kind of rough idea of what you think your property's worth. Within a neighborhood, that's usually not terribly hard because there are a lot of sales right now, and the information is usually pretty good. In rural areas, it's not so much. You know, some of the small rural towns don't have that many sales in the course of a year, and so you're not really looking at that much to compare yourself to.
Right.
So that can be a challenge in those areas too.
How about What about is it worthwhile to get an appraisal of your property to present to the board?
It could be, but again, the window is so short between
Okay.
now and May 24th, it would be difficult to get that done. Yeah, it would.
But you don't necessarily have to, well, I guess, yeah, you don't necessarily have to have it done. Do you have to have it done before grievance day, or do you have to have it done before you appear in front of the board?
Theoretically, it should be by grievance day. There's a bit of latitude the board has as to what they will do. If you submit an application to the town within 4 days of grievance day, then the assessment office can ask for an adjournment for a period of time. Because if you present evidence that they don't have, they get a chance to look it over and then maybe comment on it. So if it comes too close to grievance day, the assessor or the office can say, we're going to adjourn this for a few days so we can rebut this in some kind of way. Yeah. The assessor is presumed to be correct. And that's just the way the law is. That's not some mantra of the trade. I mean, that's presumption of validity is how you begin.
Okay, so it's different than if you go to court. If you go to court like on a criminal matter, then it's assumed that you are innocent until you're proven guilty. But in this situation, the law says that the assessor is right unless you prove him wrong. That's
correct. And the assessor does have to have some basis. The assessor can't just pick a number out of the sky and say, I'm right, prove me wrong. I mean, there has to be a basis, whether it's like we said, the computer modeling or sales or whatever.
But if you disagree, then you have the responsibility to demonstrate that they're wrong. Yeah. So what about if I look through like current real estate listings? Could I use that?
The problem with that is that pesky valuation date again, because we're looking at July 1st of last year, and anything for sale now is probably going to be spick and span and beautiful and available, but it doesn't reflect what the market was doing last July. Okay. So listings could be a problem. If you have a broker friend, sometimes a real estate broker friend, sometimes they can provide sales from the multiple listing service you can look at, which are more detailed than what you can find just in a general way. So you were an assessor for 22 years. You've been through thousands of these of individual property hearings. What are some of the most common things that people bring that they think that they can use to establish the value that just don't work? It's not a good idea to compare assessments. That doesn't really work very well. A lot of neighborhoods are perceived to be cookie cutter neighborhoods where many of the homes are all the same. They're not the same. Once a neighborhood becomes 20 years old, somebody's got a new kitchen and a new roof and a new family room off the back. And when you drive down the street and someone says, my home is just like that one, that's assessed for less, then that's really not a good case. It really shouldn't do it. It should be based on sales that occurred rather than comparative assessments. You don't want to do that. Yeah. You don't want to be accusatory. And again, even though the assessor is presumed to be correct, when you get into this thing about, you're all out to get me, or, I pay your salary, this kind of stuff, it's very antagonistic off the bat. You don't want that. As a general rule, the assessor really doesn't care what your property is worth. They just want to make sure that your piece of that pie is going to be appropriate. Yeah. Well, but that brings up another interesting question, and that is, if you have to go and appear in front of the board, what's the relationship of the board to the assessor? Does the board work for the assessor's office, or what's the relationship there? The Board of Assessment Review is an independent board, and they're appointed by the town board, and they're theoretically engaged in neighborhood property value in some way. It might be broker, they may be just someone who's been a resident for many years or whatever, but they are an independent board. And when you come in to state your case, the assessor is going to have a turn to state that case, and then the board will meet later on and decide based on the evidence who's got the better number. So the board is not necessarily on the side of the assessor. So if you want to be, accusatory about it, and you say you people, and you're looking at the board, do not do that. The board, I'm assuming that the board would not would not take that well. That sets a bad tone to start the meeting. Right. It's especially when you have a large municipality. Here's a lot of these, one after the other. And accusatory stuff just doesn't work.
So what are some other
So-
things that, what are some others, let's say that people are coming in there and they really want to work it out and they're not going to be accusatory and they bring a bunch of, papers, a bunch of whatever. Are there other kinds of things that people commonly bring in that they don't realize doesn't work very well as evidence to change their assessment?
I've seen everything from highlighted articles in the newspaper to some property owners who have come in with PowerPoint presentations of their own or spreadsheets with 50 rows of data. The idea really is just be honest with the board because they are independent. A lot of people are successful in this way when they argue the condition of their home, because it's not possible for the assessment office to physically inspect the inside of every single home. It cannot be done. So the assumption is the property is average. It's average. A lot of times a sale will have a brand new kitchen and a brand new roof where your home has the original kitchen and roof, and the condition with photographs of that sometimes is helpful.
Okay.
You can show the old original furnace and you can show the roof, and sometimes based on the condition, the board can lower your assessment to some level, which is a double-edged sword because that's usually going to be flagged by the assessor's office that it was based on a conditional reduction. And then a year from now, when you have a new roof and a new kitchen, the assessment might go back up.
Sure.
So, keep that in mind. But condition is a common way people can.
What's the funniest argument you ever heard about why somebody should change the assessment?
The funniest one?
Yeah. The most outrageous.
I would have to think on that. I really
because I keep chickens in my living room, or because
there are people who often complain about the neighbors.
Okay.
And those are usually a temporary issue. You've got some teenage situation where there's a lot of loud music or something like this. I've had a situation where someone argued that the neighborhood kids were riding lawnmowers up and down the street in the middle of the night. Therefore, their assessment should be lowered because of this horrible condition. Every neighborhood really has the eyesore property somewhere.
Okay.
And if you live next to it, that could be distressing for you. Unfortunately, usually that kind of thing can't be quantified. You can't say my property is worth 10% less because of that eyesore next door. You really can't do that. A lot of times the person contesting the assessment is the eyesore. And they have the overgrown brush in the tree. They can't afford to put the roof on. That's another situation that does happen. Yeah.
So what kinds of things could you do to your house that might increase your assessment? Like are there improvements that people could make or something that could change their assessment?
Yes. Remember that when we're assessing real estate, we're assessing real property. And real property is defined as your piece of the planet Earth and everything that's on it. So if you own a half acre in a subdivision, your real property includes that half acre lot and the house and the barn and the deck and the patio and the driveway, all of it. So if you add a deck off the back or a 3-season room or put up a barn, that's part of your property value. And that would probably trigger an assessment change.
So it's not just the house.
No, it's not just the house. It's
Yeah,
the
so I mean,
property, which is your piece of the earth and whatever
Right.
just happens to be there.
Yeah, so we have to be careful about who we take advice from, because, for example, I heard a story about a contractor who told a homeowner, well, we're going to make your deck special and we're going to not attach it to the house because then it can't affect the value. But that's not the case, is it?
That is not the case, no. If it's part of your little section of the planet Earth, it's part of your real property, and it can and probably will be assessed. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I also heard that, and I think probably this time of year, there are probably advertisements for people who are tax reps who, put ads out there and specialize, what they broadcast is, I'll get your assessment lowered. Tell me about, do you have any thoughts about those folks? Are they worth working with, or what's the deal with them?
Well, the pros to this are that the system can be somewhat overwhelmed if you let it be. It's really, the whole process to contest your assessment is really very straightforward. Some people are frustrated because they're not familiar with the language and the terms and things. It's easy to sign up with a tax rep who just says, I will do it all, and I'll take a cut of what I save you. That may seem attractive to some homeowners because they can just sit back and let somebody do the work for them. On the other side of that coin, when a tax rep files a case on your behalf, everybody knows that this is an advocate, and this person probably is trying to skew the number as low as possible, whether it's right or wrong. A homeowner is probably going to be more forthcoming when the board asks questions of condition and quality and things. The tax rep is not going to know. The homeowner would. So a lot of times the homeowner could do, you could get a result quicker and without paying anybody to do it. But if you want to hire a tax rep, understand that when that person goes in, there will be a bit of antagonism probably at the board already, because the board realizes that this person doesn't know much about the property.
Yeah, and is there much of a difference between the quality of different tax reps? Are there good and bad ones, or are they more like pretty much uniform?
As with any profession, you've got good ones and bad ones. You know, some people work on an approach where they want to do a lot of these, and the idea is they will save. They'll contract with as many homeowners as they can, fill out the paperwork, and then in a grand gesture, arrive at the assessor's office and throw them on the counter and make a little drama there. That's usually not a good way, because that gets the process off to a bad start. Some are very honest and forthcoming. I mean, some people can just understand that the valuation date is in the past, and here's an appraisal, or here's documentation I have on behalf of this person. And remember, a tax rep, you can designate anybody you want to challenge the assessment of your home. If you're elderly and you have an adult son or daughter who wants to do it for you, you can designate them to do it for you. Likewise, if you're a new homeowner and you want one of your parents to challenge it for you, you can designate them to do it. It doesn't have to be a paid tax rep. It could be a friend.
Yeah. If you want to go the paid route, do you have any thoughts on how you might find a good one? How could a consumer tell a good one from a bad one? Is there any good way?
I don't think there's a lot of advertising that goes on in this field. Again, the window is very small.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are just word of mouth. Generally, in a year like this, where a lot of towns are doing updates and reassessment projects, there's a lot of solicitation that goes on, especially in the lakefront communities, because those values change annually. That's a constant movement, and okay. a lot of tax reps who work in that type of situation, just word of mouth keeps them busy. Yeah. They don't really need to advertise very much.
And what I've heard is, if you do want to have somebody represent you, whether it be a professional or whether it be somebody that just, you might know a friend of yours or somebody who might navigate the system better.
Sure. It's
critically important that you put them on your form, right? That you empower them to speak on your behalf. Yes. Otherwise, they can't even appear and make the
right. The form actually has a place where you have to sign your name and say, I believe this is the value of my property.
Okay.
There's also a place where you sign if you want to designate somebody. Someone just can't walk in and challenge the assessment of a property they don't own and then go back to the homeowner and say, hey, look what I did for you. You owe me money now. Right. That doesn't work. You have to have an authorization for anybody to speak on your behalf. And that makes sense, because you don't want people to just kind of come in and flaunt the system just for that.
So I get a letter from the town, or I take a look at their website and I look and I see that my assessment has changed and I'm concerned about that. Or if I want more information about that, where can I get more information about my assessment and how it's been calculated?
The assessor's office ought to have that. Again, the window is very small, and staffing being what it is, and COVID being what it is, not everyone can get to the assessor's office to look. Most of this stuff is available online. Each town has to have their tentative roll available through the town website in May.
Okay.
So you can look there. Most towns, as a courtesy, will put out sales that you can look at to kind of sort through and see what's similar to yours and not.
Yeah. So the town hall or the town website is where you would go to get more information.
Yeah, that's the best place. Yeah.
So let's say I get my notice, I have a concern, I think my assessment might be too high. What can people put on their 30-minute action list today to address that?
Today, I would put on a list to call the assessor's office in a few days and ask them what the 2022 tentative assessment of the property is. And then that's where I would start, because it's possible it didn't change. It's possible it's rolled over from last year. There is something called an equalization rate that kicks in if the municipality does not maintain a 100% level of assessment. Most of the towns in Monroe County are at 100%, but the market's been so strong that we really don't know if that's going to stick, because again, the residential market, as you said, is very, very strong as compared to some of the industrial markets, which are not. Some of the office markets are strong and some aren't. So I would put that on my list of things to do, is to check that out.
Okay. Well, Nate Gabbert, thank you so much for joining us on 30-Minute
Sure.
Money.
I'm glad to be here. And remember, the window, as I say, the window is very short. So grievance day is the day. After that, you've got to wait another year.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Very welcome. Thank you.